I still remember that electrifying moment as if it were etched in molten gold. 100 words of raw, searing revelation that shattered every illusion I'd ever clung to. On a bleak, rain-soaked evening, I returned home early and stumbled upon the scene that would change my life forever. I caught my wife in the arms of my own brother. In that split second, every promise, every whispered secret of trust, and every shared dream dissolved into bitter ash. The betrayal burned like wildfire through my soul, and I knew then that nothing in my world would ever be the same again. 4 years, I believed in the sanctity of our marriage, a bond forged in mutual respect, deep affection, and the comforting familiarity of our family life. My wife, elegant and loving, had been my confidant, my partner in every sense. We had built a future together on shared hopes and plans, and I trusted her with every fiber of my being. I never doubted her loyalty, never suspected that the very foundation of our union might be based on lies. Yet, beneath the surface of our seemingly idyllic life, a secret had been festering, a secret so potent and poisonous that its revelation would not only shatter my trust but also obliterate the lives of those I once held dear. It was an ordinary Tuesday that began like any other. I had finished work earlier than usual and, feeling unexpectedly light, decided to surprise my family by coming home before dinner. The rhythmic patter of rain on the windshield set a reflective tone as I navigated the slick roads, lost in my thoughts of a quiet evening. I imagined the gentle hum of conversation, the clinking of cutlery at our dinner table, and the soft laughter that usually filled our living room. But as I pulled into the driveway, an uneasy sensation prickled at the back of my mind, a whisper of doubt that I could not quite shake off. I walked up to our front door and found it slightly ajar, an oddity in our secure, always locked home. With cautious steps, I pushed the door open and entered, expecting to hear the murmur of our family's routine. Instead, I was met with an eerie silence that immediately set my heart racing. I called out softly, "Hello?" but received no answer. The house was dark, its familiar corners now draped in ominous shadows. My footsteps echoed in the hallway as I slowly made my way to our bedroom, a room that had always been a sanctuary for our private moments of tenderness. There, in a scene that felt too surreal to be real, I found them. My wife was entwined in an embrace with my brother, their closeness so intimate that it seemed as if they belonged together, and that I had been nothing more than an unwitting bystander in their secret union. Time appeared to freeze. My world, which had once been filled with promises of fidelity and love, shattered in that single, devastating moment. The shock of betrayal was so complete, so all-encompassing, that I could barely move. The very air in the room felt thick with the weight of their treachery. I stood rooted to the spot, my mind unable to process the scene before me. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to escape the painful reality that now unfolded before my eyes. But I remained paralyzed, my heart pounding in my ears as I tried to reconcile the image with the woman I thought I knew. My wife, the woman who had promised to love me forever, was now a stranger, and my brother, someone I had trusted and loved like my own flesh, was complicit in the most despicable act of betrayal imaginable. In that agonizing moment, a torrent of emotions surged through me, rage, heartbreak, humiliation, and a deep, burning sense of betrayal. The images of their embrace, the whispered intimacy, and the furtive glances they exchanged were seared into my mind. I felt as if my very identity was being torn asunder by the cruel revelation that my closest relationships had been poisoned by deception. How could this be real? How could the people I had trusted so implicitly be capable of such treachery? Slowly, I managed to tear myself away from the horrific scene and retreat to the solitude of our living room. I sank onto the couch, my legs trembling, and stared blankly ahead as tears blurred my vision. The world outside continued its indifferent rhythm, rain still fell softly, cars passed by on the street, while inside, my heart was plunged into a dark abyss of despair. I felt betrayed not only by my wife but by my own inability to see the warning signs. Every memory of our laughter, every shared secret, now felt like a cruel lie, a carefully constructed facade that masked a reality far more painful than I could ever have imagined. As I sat there, numb and overwhelmed by the enormity of the revelation, I began to question everything I thought I knew about love, trust, and loyalty. I wondered how I could have been so blind to the subtle hints, the fleeting moments when something was off, when her eyes would linger a little too long on her phone, or when her tone would shift ever so slightly as if hiding a secret. In the quiet, desperate hours of that night, I resolved that I could not let this betrayal define me without consequence. I had to act, not just to salvage what little dignity I had left, but to dismantle the web of lies that had destroyed my world. I knew that the path ahead would be brutal, a journey through a labyrinth of anger, sorrow, and ultimately, revenge. A part of me burned with the desire to expose their deceit, to let the world see the truth that had been hidden behind closed doors. I envisioned a future where their lives would be irrevocably altered by the revelation of their betrayal, a future where the pain they inflicted on me would serve as the catalyst for their own downfall. The idea of revenge was both terrifying and exhilarating, a dark promise that whispered of retribution in the silence of my shattered heart. Determined to reclaim my life, I reached for the old leather-bound journal that had been my confidant through the ups and downs of our marriage. I began to write furiously, each word a desperate plea for understanding, each sentence a bitter admission of the shattered dreams I now faced. I documented every detail of that harrowing moment, every tear that fell, every shock that coursed through me. I wrote of the betrayal, the humiliation, and the overwhelming sense of loss that now defined my existence. As I wrote, the raw pain gradually transformed into a steely resolve, a resolve to seek the truth, to confront the lies, and to ensure that neither my wife nor my brother could ever escape the consequences of their actions. I spent the remainder of the night gathering every scrap of evidence I could find, text messages, emails, photos, and even a digital log of activity from our shared devices. Every piece of evidence was a nail in the coffin of the illusion I had once believed in. I meticulously organized them into a folder on my computer, each file a testament to the unraveling of a life built on deception. As the hours passed, a cold determination began to harden within me. I resolved that when dawn broke, I would confront them both. I would no longer allow their lies to fester in the shadows while I remained a passive victim. The first light of morning brought with it a bleak clarity. I stared out at the rain, my mind racing with plans of retribution and the unyielding need for closure. I knew that the confrontation would be excruciating, that it would force me to face not only the betrayal but also the deepest, most painful parts of my own soul. Yet, I also knew that I could not continue living in a world built on lies. I had to take a stand. I had to expose the truth, not only to myself but to the world. The thought of their secret life, the lies they had spun to protect themselves, fueled a dark determination inside me. I would not be the one left to pick up the pieces of a broken love alone. As I prepared myself mentally for what was to come, I felt a strange mixture of devastation and empowerment. The betrayal was raw and soul-crushing, yet it had also awakened something deep within me, a relentless drive to reclaim my self-respect and rebuild my future from the ruins of our shattered marriage. I knew that the road ahead would be littered with pain and regret, that the truth would not come easily and that the cost of justice might be high. But I also knew that I could no longer live in the shadow of deception. I was determined to let the light of truth expose every dark corner of our once cherished life. In that pivotal moment, as I clutched my journal and the folder of evidence, I made a silent vow to myself. I would destroy the false world they had built and ensure that they would pay for every lie, every betrayal. I would use the truth as my weapon, exposing their deceit for all to see and reclaiming my life piece by painful piece. I knew that this act of retribution might leave scars that would never fully heal, but I was ready to accept the cost if it meant finally setting my spirit free. Now, as I stand on the threshold of a new beginning, where the ruins of our shared past lie scattered like broken glass, I am filled with a resolute determination to face the storm head-on. I will confront my wife and my brother with the evidence, demand answers, and let the world know that I refuse to be defined by their treachery. My heart, though shattered, beats with the promise of a future built on truth, justice, and the unyielding power of self-respect. With every breath, I embrace the possibility of rebirth, the hope that from the ashes of our broken union, I can forge a new path, a path where the scars of betrayal serve not as chains, but as reminders of the strength I have gained. I am no longer the man who once believed in a love untainted by secrets. I am a man awakened to the harsh reality of deception, ready to shatter the lies and rebuild my life on my own terms. The day after that night of shattering revelation, my mind was a battlefield, a swirling chaos of anger, betrayal, and an aching need for justice. I awoke to an overcast sky, the morning light muted and heavy, as if reflecting the gloom in my heart. Every step I took felt laden with the weight of a secret that had been tearing me apart. I knew that nothing could remain hidden much longer. The betrayal of an open marriage, a promise that was supposed to be our mutual exploration of freedom, had been manipulated solely for her indulgence. I had been left on the sidelines, forced to watch as she lived out her fantasies without a thought for the pain it would cause me. I spent that morning pacing our empty living room, where every object, every familiar piece of decor, now served as a cruel reminder of happier times. I replayed the images in my mind, the carefree laughter during our early days, the quiet nights of shared dreams, all juxtaposed with the cold, calculating glint in her eyes as she embraced a life of secret encounters. The silence of the house was oppressive, and I felt as though the very walls were closing in on me, demanding that I confront the reality of our unraveling marriage. Determined to reclaim the truth, I began to gather every scrap of evidence that had come to light in recent weeks. I printed out messages from her phone that documented her late-night outings and compiled screenshots of the calendar entries where open marriage was nothing more than a hollow excuse for her indulgence. Each piece of evidence was meticulously organized into a thick folder, the pages of which confirmed what I had long suspected: her freedom was hers alone. I had been offered nothing but a token openness, a one-sided arrangement that had left me humiliated and betrayed. In the midst of this inner storm, I reached out to my closest confidant, Marcus. We met at a quiet, dimly lit diner off the beaten path, far away from the prying eyes of our usual social circles. Over a pot of steaming coffee, I recounted the painful details that had invaded my life, the late nights when I'd been left alone wondering, the texts that I had dismissed as work-related at first, and the reality that our marriage was not the partnership of equals I had once believed it to be. I thought an open marriage was supposed to be about sharing freedom, I said, my voice cracking with the bitterness of my emotions, but it turns out it was just an excuse for you to chase after your desires while I was expected to stay in the dark. Marcus's eyes narrowed in empathy, and he placed a steady hand on mine. You deserve transparency, he murmured. You have every right to confront this and demand the truth. His words were a lifeline, a reminder that I wasn't alone in this struggle. That evening, I returned home with a renewed resolve. I spent hours rehearsing my confrontation, standing before the mirror in our nearly empty hallway. I practiced the questions that had been burning inside me, questions that I had avoided for far too long. When did you start? Who are you really with? Why have you left me out of your world? With each repetition, I could feel my anger coalescing into a fierce determination. I knew that the conversation I was about to have would be one of the most difficult of my life, but it was also necessary if I were ever to reclaim my dignity and rewrite the narrative of our shattered union. That night, as darkness swallowed the world outside and the soft hum of the rain became my only companion, I sent her a message: we need to talk. Now. The words, simple yet loaded with the full weight of my pain, lingered in the silence that followed. I sat alone in the living room, the evidence folder resting on the coffee table like an indictment, waiting for the moment when I would finally confront the woman who had once been my entire world. Time dragged on painfully. Every minute seemed to stretch into an eternity as I waited for her return. I recalled every conversation, every fleeting hint, every subtle sign that I had once dismissed in the name of trust. The memory of her soft laughter on the phone, the secretive glances when she thought I wasn't looking, all now converged into a bitter montage of deception. I knew that soon, I would have to face her, face the lies, the betrayal, and the stark truth of a love that had been nothing more than a carefully maintained illusion. When the front door finally creaked open, I was ready. There she stood, her expression shifting from guarded uncertainty to one of deep, painful resignation as she stepped into the living room. The air between us was thick with tension, a silent storm of unspoken words and raw emotion. I motioned for her to sit, and as she did, I placed the folder of evidence on the table. We need to talk, I said, my voice steady yet heavy with sorrow. I want to know the truth. I want to understand why our open marriage has become nothing more than a one-sided freedom, for you, not for us. For a long, excruciating moment, she said nothing. The silence was broken only by the soft ticking of the clock and the quiet drip of rain outside. Then, in a voice barely audible, she began to speak. Her words were tentative at first, as if she were struggling to untangle the tangled web of her own deceptions. It wasn't supposed to be like this, she murmured, her eyes avoiding mine. I thought I could have both, our life together and the freedom to be me. I felt a surge of anger at the hollow justification. Freedom? Is that what you call it? I pressed, my tone rising with each word. I was led to believe we would share that freedom, that we would both explore and grow. Instead, you've taken it all for yourself, leaving me out of the picture, kept in the dark. Her eyes filled with tears as she tried to speak, but the flood of evidence silenced her pleas. I continued, each word a dagger aimed at the heart of our once sacred bond. You knew what we agreed on, a life where we both had room to grow, where we both had a say in our future. But your actions, your secret trips, your hidden messages, they say you only wanted the freedom for yourself. You wanted to live a life that excluded me, and you allowed our vows to be nothing more than empty words. I could see the pain in her face, the regret and the shame, but the damage was done. The conversation, raw and unrelenting, unraveled the last vestiges of trust one had once held dear. As she finally began to confess, her voice trembling with guilt and sorrow, I listened with a heart torn between heartbreak and a grim sense of inevitability. Every admission, every halting explanation, confirmed that the life we had built was nothing more than a facade, an elaborate ruse to satisfy her own desires while I was left to bear the burden of secrecy and false promises. I realized then that this was more than just a betrayal of love, it was a fundamental dismantling of the mutual respect and partnership that had once defined us. In that painfully honest moment, I felt a shift within myself, a realization that I could no longer be a passive recipient of her choices. The betrayal had carved deep scars, but those scars were also the roadmap to reclaiming my own identity. I gathered every piece of evidence in my mind and in that folder, and I vowed that I would not let her deception continue to control my life. The confrontation was the first step toward my own retribution, a promise that I would restore my dignity, rebuild my future, and make sure that the truth would never again be hidden in the shadows of our shared life. When the confrontation finally ended, the room was filled with a heavy silence, a silence that spoke of lost dreams and the irrevocable shattering of our past. I watched her leave, her figure a ghost of the woman I had once loved, and felt both a profound sense of sorrow and an emerging determination. The betrayal was complete, but in its aftermath, I realized that I had been given a terrible gift, the opportunity to redefine myself. I would no longer allow her actions to dictate my worth or my future. I spent that night in a state of reflective isolation, turning the evidence over in my mind like a cold, unyielding truth that I could no longer deny. I wrote feverishly in my journal, each line a raw outpouring of anger, hurt, and a fierce resolve to rebuild. I acknowledged the pain, yes, but I also recognized the potential for rebirth. Every tear, every bitter memory, would be a stepping stone toward a future where honesty and mutual respect would be the cornerstones of my life. I had reached a turning point, one where I could either let the bitterness consume me or channel it into the strength needed to reclaim my dignity. In that long, tumultuous day and night, I began to see a vision of the future, a future where I was no longer defined by her betrayal but by the courage to face the truth and rebuild. I vowed to myself that I would not rest until I had taken every step necessary to dismantle the false life we had built and expose the raw, unvarnished reality to the world. I was determined to reclaim my self-worth, to ensure that the deception and hypocrisy that had ravaged our union would no longer hold power over me. Now, as I sit here with the evidence of our unraveling love spread out before me, I feel a quiet, unyielding determination rising from the depths of my broken heart. The road ahead is long and treacherous, paved with difficult decisions and the inevitable pain of confronting a past that can never be changed. But I am resolute. I have seen the truth, and I have tasted the bitter poison of betrayal. I will use that truth as my weapon, my armor, and my guide as I step forward into a future defined not by the lies of yesterday but by the promise of my own reclaimed destiny. I awoke to a sky heavy with storm clouds and a heart still raw from the confrontation, each beat echoing the fury of betrayal and the painful clarity of truth. In that moment, everything I had once known was reduced to ashes, and I stood at the crossroads of vengeance and renewal. The evidence of her one-sided open marriage had been laid bare in our home, and the confrontation that ensued left my world fractured. Yet, amid the ruins of our shared dreams, I sensed a flicker of something powerful, a resolve that I would no longer be defined by her selfish desires or by the lies that had poisoned our union. The days that followed were a relentless cascade of emotions. I retreated into solitude, seeking refuge in the quiet corners of our now sterile home where each room whispered of happier times, now tainted by deceit. I poured my anguish into endless journal entries, each word a cathartic release of the torment I'd felt since discovering that she had embraced the open marriage for her own indulgence, leaving me to bear the brunt of loneliness and betrayal. As I documented every painful detail, from the secretive glances and hushed phone calls to the nights when I found myself alone with my thoughts, I began to stitch together the shattered fragments of my identity. I realized that while my love had been exploited, this betrayal had also ignited a fire within me, a burning desire for retribution that promised to reshape my future. Determined not to remain a silent victim, I embarked on a calculated plan of revenge that was as brutal as it was liberating. First, I meticulously compiled every scrap of evidence, messages that she had carelessly left on her phone, bank statements revealing unexplained expenses, and calendar entries that confirmed her clandestine outings. I organized these pieces into a dossier, a cold, unyielding chronicle of deception that I intended to use not only as a personal reminder of the truth but as the cornerstone of my retribution. Every detail was documented with precision. Every date, every location, every name became a building block for the plan I was about to set in motion. My initial move was to ensure that the world would know the full extent of her betrayal. I reached out to our closest friends and family, carefully selecting those who had always valued honesty over politeness. In a series of quiet, one-on-one conversations, I shared the painful evidence and my disillusionment with what we had become. I spoke of our once cherished vows and how they had been twisted into a sham, a facade that allowed her to indulge in freedom while I was left to suffer the consequences. Their shock and support resonated with me. I saw in their eyes that my pain was real and that I was not alone. It was a bitter comfort, but it also steeled me for what lay ahead. Emboldened by the solidarity of those who cared, I decided that my next step would be to dismantle the false life she had constructed, and to do so publicly. I created a detailed online exposé, a blog post that recounted every aspect of my discovery with unflinching honesty. I included excerpts from my diary, screenshots of incriminating messages, and carefully redacted documents that revealed the truth behind our so-called open marriage. The post was raw and uncompromising, a full-throated indictment of the double standard that had left me betrayed and humiliated. I shared my story with a simple declaration: I trusted the person I loved, and she shattered that trust to chase a freedom meant only for her. This is my truth, and you deserve to know it. The response was overwhelming. Strangers wrote to me, recounting their own experiences of betrayal and celebrating my courage to expose the lies. In that public moment, I felt the first stirring of vindication, a validation that my actions were not only justified but necessary to reclaim my dignity. With the exposé now circulating among those who mattered, and even reaching the broader public, I turned my focus to the next phase of my revenge. I arranged a meeting with a top-tier attorney known for handling high-profile divorce cases. In our long, sober discussions, we strategized how to not only secure my legal rights but also how to ensure that the full extent of her deception would be legally documented. I wanted her to face the consequences of a marriage that had been built on unequal promises. Every signature, every court document, became a step away from the life I had known and a declaration that I would no longer be complicit in a lie. The legal process was grueling, a series of painful admissions and long, drawn-out negotiations, but each moment brought me closer to a future where I could rebuild on a foundation of truth. At the same time, I devoted myself to personal transformation. I signed up for therapy with Dr. Simone Clark, whose incisive yet compassionate approach helped me navigate the storm of emotions with clarity. In our sessions, I learned that while the betrayal would forever leave a scar, it could also serve as a source of strength. Revenge can be a path to reclaiming yourself, she told me one day, but remember, true healing comes from building something new, something that reflects your inherent worth, not the damage done to you. Her words echoed in my mind as I began to embrace the process of self-reinvention. I rejoined the local gym, rediscovered the solace of long runs in the park, and even took up painting as a means to channel the raw energy of my emotions into something creative and cathartic. Each new habit, each small act of self-care, was a rebellion against the betrayal, a silent promise that I was not going to let the past dictate my future. I also threw myself into my work with renewed vigor. I took on challenging projects, pushed the boundaries of my creativity, and allowed myself to be recognized for my talents in ways that I had never allowed before. My performance at work became a testament to my resilience. Every successful presentation and every compliment from colleagues was a small victory against the darkness of betrayal. Slowly, the professional accolades began to stitch together a new self-image, a version of me that was defined by strength, determination, and an unwavering commitment to truth. One pivotal evening, fueled by a mix of righteous anger and a desperate need for closure, I orchestrated a final, dramatic confrontation. I invited my wife and a few key members of our family to a dinner, a carefully arranged gathering where, amidst the clinking of glasses and the soft murmur of conversation, I would expose the full measure of her deception. The event was set in a sleek, modern venue, chosen not for its opulence but for its stark, unadorned atmosphere, a fitting stage for the raw truth that I was about to unveil. I had arranged for a slideshow that documented every piece of evidence, from the cryptic text messages to the detailed timeline of her secret outings. As the images flashed on the screen, the room fell into an uncomfortable hush. I spoke in a measured, unyielding tone, recounting the betrayal and the imbalance of our open marriage, a relationship that had promised freedom for both but had delivered only for her. I demanded accountability, not just from her, but from the system that allowed such deceit to flourish behind a veneer of modernity. The confrontation was brutal. Her face, illuminated by the harsh glow of the projector, contorted with a mix of shame and defiance as the truth was laid bare for everyone to see. I saw in the eyes of our guests a mixture of shock and reluctant understanding. It was a moment of public reckoning, an irreversible act of exposure that left her isolated and vulnerable. That night, After the dinner ended in a flurry of hushed whispers and heavy silences, I walked away knowing that the seeds of retribution had been sown. The public humiliation, the legal proceedings, and the undeniable evidence of her betrayal would forever change the course of her life, and, in turn, pave the way for my own rebirth. I felt a grim satisfaction knowing that the truth had been unleashed, that the carefully constructed facade had crumbled, and that I was now free to rebuild my life from the ashes of deceit. In the weeks and months that followed, I dedicated myself to the painstaking process of healing and reinvention. I navigated the legal battles with a cold, calculated focus, ensuring that every aspect of our shared life, assets, finances, even personal documents, was untangled from the web of our ruined union. Each legal victory, each signed document, was a small step away from the betrayal and a stride toward a future that was unequivocally my own. Simultaneously, I continued to nurture my personal transformation. I joined support groups where survivors of betrayal shared their journeys, and I immersed myself in self-improvement courses that reinforced my emerging sense of self-worth. I began to reconnect with passions that had once defined me, rediscovering the joy of music, art, and the simple pleasure of a quiet, unburdened morning. Every new experience, every achievement, no matter how small, was a testament to the fact that I was no longer shackled by the weight of her lies. One crisp winter morning, I found myself standing at the edge of a frozen lake, watching the sunrise paint the horizon in brilliant hues of gold and red. The scene was breathtaking in its beauty, and in that moment, I felt a profound sense of renewal. I realized that just as the lake transformed from a dark, frozen expanse into a shimmering surface reflecting the new day, so too could I transform the scars of betrayal into the foundation for a vibrant, authentic future. The cold air filled my lungs with a promise of liberation, and I vowed to let the pain of the past guide me, not as a burden, but as a catalyst for growth. With the passage of time, the public confrontation became a turning point, a brutal yet necessary act of retribution that set the stage for my eventual healing. The pain, while it never fully vanished, became interwoven with a newfound strength. I learned to forgive not for her sake, but for my own freedom. I embraced the reality that my worth was not defined by her betrayal, and that every moment of suffering was a step toward reclaiming my identity. I began to see my scars as symbols of survival, reminders that I had withstood the storm and emerged, albeit wounded, with an unbreakable spirit. Now, as I look back on that tumultuous period, I see it as a crucible that forged the man I am today, a man who refuses to be defined by the actions of others, who has learned to stand tall in the face of unimaginable pain, and who now walks a path lit by the unwavering beacon of truth. I have rebuilt my life on a foundation of honesty, resilience, and the relentless pursuit of my own happiness. The journey was arduous, filled with moments of crushing despair and bursts of righteous anger, but through it all, I discovered that the only way to truly be free was to confront the truth, to expose the lies, and to let the light of reality banish the darkness of deception. In that final, transformative act of reclaiming my identity, I left behind a legacy of strength, a testament to the power of the human spirit to rise from the ashes of betrayal. I now live each day with a fierce commitment to my own truth, knowing that while the scars of the past may never fully fade, they are a permanent reminder of the battles I have fought and the resilience I have gained. My future is no longer defined by the deceit of a once-beloved partner, but by my own choices, my own dreams, and the unyielding belief that I deserve a life of authenticity and unconditional respect. As the sun sets on one chapter and rises on another, I embrace the promise of a new dawn with open arms. I am the master of my own destiny, a man reborn from the ashes of betrayal, ready to forge a future where love is not a weapon for deception, but a foundation for genuine connection. And so, with every sunrise and every beat of my mended heart, I step forward into this new life, a life defined by strength, integrity, and the unassailable power of truth.